I want to get a personal perspective on what we've seen in this country in the last 3 or 4 days, in the last 14 months, in fact, from Suzi Smeed. She's a Holocaust survivor and an author who's joined us before to discuss anti-Semitism in Australia. Here's what Suzi told us back in May.
Jewish people in this country are frightened, which has never happened before. This has always been a wonderful, free country that I love desperately, but I am finding it very frightening.
Suzi now joins me again. Good to speak to you again, Suzi. You were very dismayed and very perturbed and felt very vulnerable back in May. Tell me about what's transpired since and how you feel in the wake of that synagogue fire in Melbourne and the action announced today by the Prime Minister.
Well, Chris, first of all, thank you for your wonderful support for the Jewish community. We really appreciate it. And I've got to say, I am absolutely horrified and devastated at what has happened since we spoke in May. Things have only got so much worse in this country. I mean, that bombing of the synagogue on Friday was like Kristallnacht. It was just horrifying. But things, you know, we've had over 2,000 anti-Semitic things happening here in this country this last year. And I sheet it all back to the Albanese government. They have done absolutely nothing to rein back the anti-Semitism. I was just reading, and I'll just show you this. This is the Crimes Act 1900, Section 93Z. And it says, offence of publicly threatened or inciting violence on grounds of race, religion, sexual orientation, etc. And this can be prosecuted, and down the bottom, by a police officer. Now, this could have been done on the 9th of October before any of this started here in this country. This Albanese government should hang their head in shame.
Well, this is... sorry to interrupt, Suzi, but this has been my point all along. Those laws are there, and celebrating the death of innocent Jews and talking out where's the Jews. This could be construed as inciting violence, and yet laws were never tested. And I think we needed political leaders to get up there and publicly call this out and demand that police pursue this to the extent of the law that they possibly could. Instead, they've all held back. The police have held back because the politicians haven't given the lead. Now, you survived the Holocaust as a baby, as an infant with your family. You've had a blessed life here in Australia. The contrast of how you must have been feeling 2 years ago to now, can you explain that? Because this must have seemed like a blessed sanctity from all of the horrors that we've seen in Europe.
Well, ever since I've lived in this wonderful country, as I've said before, I have never experienced any anti-Semitism but since the 7th of October, when this government let these, what I call these useful idiots that support Hamas, Hezbollah, and all the things that have been happening in the Middle East, and they call it, and they come out and demonstrate against Jews. They come and put signs on Nazi signs everywhere. The Jews are frightened to go out. Children are frightened to go to school. I mean, I just saw recently that school children in Melbourne were harassed on a train.
Terrible.
And it's just been back like Nazi Germany. And you know, as I always say, when I speak at schools in my Courage to Care program, I always finish with saying the Holocaust did not start with gas ovens and murder. It started with slogans and demonstrations and words. And this is what has been happening in this country. And as I said before, you know, Albanese and Penny Wong, and they've signed with all these UN declarations against Israel, to the point that Hamas have come out and praised them. Yeah. I mean, what does that say about the leaders in this country?
That is a chilling reminder, Suzi Smeed, about where all this begins, where it all begins and ends. Thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it greatly. Suzi Smeed there, who's a Holocaust survivor. Imagine surviving the Holocaust as a child, having this blessed life in this sanctuary of Australia, and then seeing this unfold over the past 14 months. Just horrible.